Oh, happy Sunday, everyone, and welcome to my show where it really is okay to not be okay. I'm Rae Bonney, a workplace mental health specialist, passionate about shining a light on the lives, challenges and strengths of men and boys, especially around crisis and suicide prevention. When I'm not on air, I'm working with people from all parts of life and getting pretty jazzed about mental health, masculinity and change. It's not every girl's dream job, but hey, men matter too. Now, for today's show. The world just loves a good stat, doesn't it? We quote them, post them, argue about them, and use the research to justify our opinions. But how often do we actually stop to ask, where does the data come from? Who are the people behind the research? What drives someone to commit years of their life to a PhD, and who supports them along the way? Well, Michael Wilson, Research Fellow in Men's Mental Health at Orygen, is one of these people and part of the new generation of men's health researchers helping shape what evidence really means in the lives of men. His latest work explores why some men face higher suicide risk after relationship breakdown, especially how emotion, dysregulation and loneliness can collide in the months after separation. Today we're unpacking the why behind Michael's dedication to this space, the purpose, persistence and curiosity that fuels his work, and how good support is essential in making it all possible. There'll also be a special This Is Your Life moment for Michael at around 11 a.m. when we phone in a very special guest to surprise him. Anyway, without further ado, here he is, live in the studios of 3WBC. Welcome to the show, Michael Wilson.
Hi, Rae. Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
That took a long time, didn't it?
It's very comprehensive.
It's very comprehensive. Did I get it right, though?
You did. You nailed it, I think. Yeah.
Fantastic. Mm-hmm. Now, we actually don't know each other. This is our first time meeting.
Mm-hmm.
So
face-to-face, yeah.
Bit of a stand-up. We did Zoom, didn't we?
Mm.
But LinkedIn, I love LinkedIn, how it tells you exactly how long you've known somebody for. And we've been connected since April 2024. Mm-hmm. So I have been following your work with great interest and also a great consumer of your work as well, because it informs a lot of the work that we're doing out on the ground as well. So thank you for that.
Yeah, my pleasure. It's always great to hear that there are people, great people like yourselves who are doing amazing advocacy work who can actually benefit from, the work that people like myself do. And we don't often hear about how research is used out in the world. So it's amazing to hear that people are using it.
So you don't get a lot of feedback? Like once you've poured the blood, sweat and tears into something and you publish it, do you often just get crickets?
Often, yeah. I mean, it sort of depends on what sort of research you've done, but unfortunately a lot of research, particularly if you're based at a university and you're a kind of, a sort of more hardcore academic, I suppose, a lot of research is only ever written and or read by researchers. And so that's something I think that really drives me and I think is really important for other researchers to kind of do more of, and something that I really enjoy working in this space is the capacity for what we call knowledge translation and how we can actually, make sure that the work we do is going to be read and taken up by other people out there. But yeah, it's not always the case that people will give you feedback of what they've what has resonated about your work and what they've taken from it. But yeah, I've been very lucky over the last sort of 6 months or so when I have published some things that have been kind of the biggest things that I've ever worked on, really. It's been really nice to hear that it is resonating with people. So, yeah.
Do you ever research just for fun?
I think what drew me to research initially was, I guess, a kind of natural curiosity about people. So I think there's an inherent kind of level of interest and fun and curiosity in that. I always thought I wanted to go down the path similar to you of becoming a psychologist or counselor or some sort of kind of mental health practitioner in the room with people. But I sort of found that, if you want to go down that path, you have to do a certain amount of research training anyway. And I found that I was quite, it really worked with my very type A sort of brain. And I just, found I was quite good at it and really enjoyed it. And there's parts of it that weirdly enough I find fun. So even when not necessarily researching the most fun topics at times, being that I research suicide, I think, you have to find a certain amount of lightness and I think, you know, find the parts of it that you do, you know, get joy and value from. So.
And when you mention maybe going down the psychology path because wanting to be in the room with people, I guess you do that to a degree when you're doing the kinds of research that you're doing, that you are speaking to people. And when you mentioned, you know, speaking about suicide as well, you'd be doing exactly that. Yeah,
totally. It's really not too dissimilar in a lot of ways. So, for example, one of the studies that forms part of my PhD, which maybe we'll get into, but has involved interviewing young men about their breakup experiences, essentially, and trying
We're absolutely talking about that later in the show.
So trying to understand, you know, their paths of reaction and recovery following relationship breakdown, and what the sort of emotional impact and interpersonal impact of a breakup can look like. And in a lot of ways, you know, I was very, I think, lucky to witness and hear a lot of the vulnerability that these young men were showing. Like a lot of the guys that I spoke to said that they'd never had a conversation with anyone else like that they had with me for the purposes of that interview. And so, yeah, in a lot of ways it is, you know, open, active listening and just creating the space for someone just to share totally in depth what has been going on for them. It's just slightly different in a research context where I might, you know, shift the conversation a bit more towards the areas I want to explore. But yeah, there's a lot of overlap in a lot of ways with being a mental health, I guess, practitioner. So,
how did that feel when you got that feedback? That feedback of gratitude.
It was really heartwarming, I think, just to know that, because the reality is these young men have come to participate in my research, and they are the ones that are bringing, you know, they're the ones that I should be grateful to, you know, because they're offering their time and their stories for the purposes of me trying to analyze it so that we can do something about it and hopefully address, you know, the problem of relationship breakdown as it is linked to male suicide. But I guess I was just really, you know, warmed by the fact that I could create a space where these young guys felt comfortable to open up to the degree that they did. Because it was both a privilege for me to witness, but it sounds like it was also quite therapeutic and cathartic for a lot of them to reflect on the things that I was really interested in asking about, because I think for a lot of them, maybe I touched on aspects of their breakup experiences that they hadn't necessarily explored too much in depth, or maybe they hadn't necessarily reflected on the impact that certain parts of their experience might have had for them. It's a real privilege. So.
How do they get to you in terms of, do they apply to be part of the study?
So that one, I put out some ads through social media, essentially. So I'm based at Orygen, as you mentioned, which is the world's largest translational research organization focused on youth mental health. And so we have a great comms team there who essentially put out some ads through social media, so through Facebook and Instagram and maybe a few other sites. And essentially you can target those ads to young men that you're interested in based on demographics and things like that. And so, yeah, I had quite a few people come through just after seeing those ads. And essentially they just said something like, you know, had a breakup in the last 3 years, want to talk about it, you know, share your experience for new mental health research, basically. And yeah, so most people just came through that way, but I also recruited young men through, because I'm based at the University of Melbourne. We have a currently recruiting kind of notice board and things like that where people can find currently recruiting studies, because most of the time you get paid, you know, a certain amount, or reimbursed, I should say, a certain amount of money to participate in research. So that might have been part of the motivation for some people, but hey, it worked for me. So.
It's amazing, isn't it, how the human condition just can't be replaced in so many respects. Like the environment that you're describing right now, that can't be replaced by some AI or computer generated thing. It has to be the human condition that is observed. And you know, from that perspective, I think that sort of just makes us feel so much more human, doesn't it?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think, yeah, just it's interesting you raised the point about AI. I think, you know, the interviews that I've done and a lot of the, you know, the other research I've done, parts of it could definitely be done by AI, but I think that really the human element in terms of actually understanding the stories behind, you know, the numbers that you're reading often, or even like analyzing the depth of what you're hearing from someone. I think there's a certain human amount to that can never be replaced by a machine, or I hope that it is never replaced by a machine. 'Cause, yeah.
But even in which the speed of evolution I'm finding is that you cannot, when we talk about research that becomes dated and, the evolution that's moving very, very quickly and the change that's moving very quickly, it's clear that, it is dated very, very quickly. So the attitudes and opinions and observations that you're making, a year, if you go like COVID times to now, we have so many different things that are in place or different ways that we view things, even since then, which again is heartening, but still the laborious nature of research still exists because it's just not one thing, is it? You have to approach things from so many different directions.
Yeah. And I think because research does take so long, like you sort of need a critical mass of not just like one individual, research publication, for example. You need a body of work behind you a lot of the time in order to really advocate for change in a particular problem. So I think whilst it is frustrating at times that it can take, far too long, I think in some ways that the amount of time that it takes, I think, is linked to the amount of rigor that is needed in order to have a body of work that can actually be relied upon, to inform policy or inform, the way therapy looks for people, for example. So I think it's a necessary evil in a lot of ways, but it is frustrating because, some of the work I've done, for example, I think there's a lot of like systemic issues just with the way research works, particularly in academia. So, for example, the big review study that I published earlier this year, that was under review with the journal that it was published in for 18 months all up. And that piece of research by definition is a review of all of the knowledge that is out there. So I know for a fact that in the time that study was under review, there has been more knowledge come out that could have been incorporated in that review. And that's not necessarily my fault, that's just, the nature of how long the process takes. But it is, in a lot of ways a system that, we need to rely on to produce knowledge, but has so many limitations in the ways in which that knowledge comes about. So yes, a necessary but frustrating evil at times.
And that's just one part of the process as well. That's not, if you go further upstream to even getting funding for research, that can take ages. And then by the time you've got the funding, then you've got to recruit a research team. That takes time as well. And if people come and go through that process, which is kind of like a gig economy, isn't it? It's like, you're there for a moment and then you're gone. So even to retain a team, let alone then get a peer review as well, it can take years. Yeah.
It can be pretty mind-boggling, I think, just the amount of time that can go into it. But yes, I'm thankful that I think part of doing a PhD is that you are the driver and the lead behind the entirety of the project. So I think, there's obviously parts of it that I can't control in terms of how long things take, but where I could, I was able to sort of speed things up where possible to keep it moving. So you can sort of figure out ways to make it feel like it's moving, even though it is a bit of a glacial pace at times.
Yeah. Well, we will talk a little bit, or a lot more about that piece of research a little bit later in the show. But I was talking to you before about a conversation I had on Friday night with another fellow researcher who's very, very well known, very well known now, Professor Paul Galdis from York in the UK. And he's done a lot of work in workplace environments for men and just brought out a really good framework for that too. But he was sort of saying that up until a year ago, no one knew who he was, no one cared who he was. He said now the phone's ringing all the time.
Yeah, right.
And we were laughing and talking about how academic research can sometimes be treated a bit like a Netflix binge. I need the current data now. I need it now to sort of support me and how I look. And, current data is now last year. We want the latest. We want the latest. And it's like, 2024, that's a bit old. So
totally, yeah.
What you were just saying just then, do you think consumer demand is just not aligned with the reality of...
Yeah, I mean, I think that level of consumer demand is essential because it motivates us to keep working hard and to keep pushing to get things done and out there as quickly as possible. But it is frustrating that the reality is sometimes we are at the behest of a, publishing system that is just glacial, as I said, at times. But I think there's a lot of other ways that researchers, even if, one publication, for example, is taking forever to get out there's a lot of other ways that you can engage with researchers in order to help have them inform your work. So I think, it's just about connecting with people, as it sounds like you've done, to really just work out what a middle ground might look like and how work can actually be informed, even if you don't have something that's super novel and current, then and there to inform it. So, and I think about other, some of the work that we've done with the team at Orygen is looking into young men's mental health in the context of social media, for example, and social media content and the whole idea of the manosphere and how that is linked with young men's mental health. And that is an example that, of a social issue that just outpaces the rate at which research can understand it. Like the disparity is just way out there. Like it's just moving so quickly and changing so quickly that there's just simply no way that really rigorous research can keep up with the rate of change in that phenomenon. So it's just about thinking differently and trying to, I guess, adapt the ways in which you're maybe studying a particular issue so that you can, as best you can, keep pace with the way that things are unfolding. So, yeah.
What's the answer to that? You look at some like more cumulative research. Like I remember that 7-Up research that started in the 50s, perhaps, which is still going now.
I believe it is. Yeah.
Is that the answer to something like this that you just keep and just building upon?
I think so. Yeah, I think so one of the studies that I've done used data from the 10 to Men study, which you might be familiar with as well. Yeah, which is Australia's, I think maybe currently the world's largest cohort study of its kind, focusing on men's health and essentially tracking. I think they started with around 16,000 men recruited at Wave 1, which was 2013 or so, and then they've surveyed the same men 4 times since then. And it's an ongoing study, like they're continuing and continually recruiting the same men and asking them, everything that's going on in their lives, basically. And so, as you say, that is one of the answers here is longitudinal research that tracks the same outcomes in the same people over time to look at really how things unfold, because often when you just hear from a group of people once, the amount that you can infer from what you hear from them, on a Tuesday afternoon can be very different, a few years down the line. So it's a really, really, beneficial, I guess, way of studying, particularly mental health and suicide prevention.
Yeah.
Especially when thinking about, the fact that these sorts of studies, you can build in new measures over time to capture new things as they're unfolding. So, I've had some, conversations with the team behind 10 to Men around the sorts of measures that, we might need to be looking at moving forward. And I know others, like other researchers in the space have done so as well. So yes, you're right. It's definitely part of the answer.
Yeah. When you look across men's health literature, where do you see areas that feel well studied and conversely important questions that feel underexplored?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think as a sort of general rule, I think what has been done to death is, I guess, comparisons between men and women in terms of mental health outcomes, suicide risk factors, everything like that. And I think it's kind of frustrating being a researcher that focuses on trying to explore the diversity and difference within and between men as a group, because research that continually compares men to women just really homogenizes all difference, and sort of assumes, I guess, in a way that all men are somehow the same and all women are the same, which is just not the case. And it is really not a perspective that is useful when we're trying to understand, for example, for the 75% of men who die by suicide in Australia, of the men who die in Australia, the 75% of them that are men, it's not useful to be comparing, those men to women when it just doesn't tell you anything about the subgroups of men that might be at risk, or the unique men, which men are at risk here and why. And so that I think is something that has been done a lot, and in a lot of cases isn't really that informative. Like my research looking into relationship breakdown as it links with male suicide, it is actually a really common risk factor for women as well. But I think, so it's not the case that men are inherently more at risk of suicide following relationship breakdown than women. It's really that risk can look different, and the factors involved in that risk and the reasons why can potentially look different in men relative to women. So I think as a rule, like what I want to see more of in the men's health space and in men's health research is more research focused on diversity and difference within and between men rather than comparing men relative to women, because as I said, it's just not all that informative. And I think one of the other really, I think, important perspectives here is what we understand as intersectionality, which is really, I think, linked with a lot of what I've just been speaking about. But Derek Griffiths, for example, who you probably know.
I know very well.
Yeah, yes. Yeah, he's awesome, does some great work looking at intersectionality and men's health. He's done a lot of work focused on men's health equity in the US and that mental health and health in general of black men in the States. And so I think intersectionality really looks at men's health according to the different axes of identity that men have and the different kind of, I guess, the different categories of social membership, be it sexuality, race, age, any of these different factors that can all intersect to influence someone's health or their health behaviors. And so that is one way that we can go within men as a group and trying to understand diversity and difference, because, yeah, as I say, for too long, men have just been compared to women, and it's holding us back from actually understanding the problems.
I really love that shift, and I think when I hear, people like Zach Zeidler and, some of the, even Movember's attitude towards that as well has really shifted. And I think, I found myself moving my dial to from, it's all about, this comparison to no, this is an everybody's issue and it's a lot more complex and more simple than we're trying to approach it. But speaking of Derek Griffith, I believe he's just arrived in Australia. So,
oh, great.
Hopefully going to catch up with him while he's here. But anyone who's listening in, well, in fact, has he been on the show? I can't remember. But anyone who's listening in, look him up, read his stuff, listen to he's everywhere, and he makes so much sense. And it's really, I think I was going to ask you this question. We've got to go to a break in a minute, but with AI and you look at the clunky and chunkiness of, research papers, we want politicians to pick them up. We want them to inform policy. But, looking at a research paper, like who wants to read one? But, with AI now being able to sort of run that through the channels and just summarize, big clunky documents and give sort of the crux and the guts of what it's about, I think is really, it's a bit of a game changer.
Yeah. And that is one way that I use it, daily, basically. Like if I'm reading something and I just need a quick, what's the quick key message of it when I don't have hours to read through the full thing, then yeah, a generative summary of it using AI is super useful.
Always fact check though.
Exactly. And that's what I was going to say. I think the issue is AI is inherently biased and will maybe look for things and put more emphasis on things that maybe don't need to be emphasized in some cases. There's a lot of people interested in what we call ethical AI, so the ways in which AI and large language models and all of that can reproduce the inequities and the biases that already exist in society, because AI is trained on the internet and the internet is a reflection of, the world, which is inherently unequal and biased.
However, can I interject there? Because I learned something this morning at about 4:30 a.m. when I just fell down a rabbit hole, that culturally, AI and the internet is modelled on Danish culture. I didn't know, and I still can't make sense of it in my head, but it pretty much excludes particularly Asian culture, much more focused on Western culture and its language.
Okay. So, yeah, interesting.
You might just want to have a look at that, because I couldn't kind of make sense of it because there wasn't enough time for me to intellectualize it, but
I mean, it sounds like it was 4:30 a.m. So I'm
look, it's a usual wake up time
didn't have
for
the
me.
Capacity. But yeah, that's interesting.
But now, Michael, it's that time in my show that I've clumsily coined the very special guest song request.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, it's a moment's break where I have a bit of fun queuing a song from your selection, and you have to guess from my cryptically cryptic clue which one it is.
Okay.
So it could be the song title, it could be the artist, it could even be the album name, you know, anything that I've come up. It's always a very, very loose thread. So are you ready?
I'm ready. Let's do
Here's
it.
your clue. A hawk promise broken.
A hawk promise broken.
If you need some more clues, I can give them to you.
I might need some more clues.
Right.
Maybe I've forgotten which songs I told you.
I mean, you only just recently disclosed to me, well, recently this morning, how old you are. So I will forgive you for not maybe knowing this. But in 1988, Prime Minister Bob Hawke promised to negotiate a treaty with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. Mm-hmm. It never materialised.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So this one is Treaty by Yothu Yindi.
Yes, that's the one. What does that mean to you?
Well, I think I was really, I guess grateful for the opportunity to choose some songs for the program, because I think music just is a reflection of culture, and I think in a lot of ways where we need to go and what needs to change. And I think that for me has never been more true than with this song. And in talking about men's mental health and suicide risk, young Indigenous Australian men have some of the highest rates of suicide of, you know, any group of men anywhere in the world. And so I think we can't talk about men's mental health without, you know, really needing to recognise the inequities of our First Nations people. So, which
we have done on this show in the introduction.
Yep.
Well, this song is actually described as one of the most important songs in Australian music history for that reason. Mm-hmm. So after the break, we're going to unpack the how, what, where, why, when and who of your work, so listeners can see how those gaps become studies and how studies become real world answers. Mm-hmm. So you're listening to 94.1 FM. It's 3WBC. Do not go away. Whoa, welcome back. The time is just 33 minutes past 10 and you're listening to Rae Bonney on What Does It Feel Like Being You Today? With me is Michael Wilson, part of a new generation of men's health researchers who are making academia feel human again. How's that? Speaking of feelings, Michael, what does it feel like being you today?
At the moment, it feels good. I was pretty nervous before I came on, as I told you. But yeah, feeling great now, having fun. Great to be here. It's warming up in Melbourne, which we love, although the wind I'm really struggling with at the moment. But yes, it feels good being me today.
From a allergy perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I don't get it too bad, but there's always a little bit of something going on. So
yeah. I know I was out there today and the blossom is literally just blasting you in the face.
I know, yeah. It's a struggle, but it's, you know, you take the wins where you can. It's nice to finally have some warmth in Melbourne. So.
And what's making you feel comfortable? Is it being in your space talking about your stuff?
I think so. I mean, it being all about me is not something I'm generally the most comfortable with. So
look, we can easily make it all about me. I have no trouble doing that.
Yeah, great. Well, I'm very, very happy to do that. But no, I think I just really appreciate the opportunity to, I guess, talk about this work in a way that, you know, you never know who's listening. There may be someone out there that can benefit from the conversation.
I know
having
who's
today,
listening.
So.
There's Mike Hagan again, because he's always listening in. He said the pop filters that I've installed today are very good.
Oh, good.
And he's interested to hear more about Michael's findings, impact on social media, on adolescence, and if he has any opinions on Dr. Jonathan Haidt's Anxious Generation book.
Yeah, good question. Yeah.
Thanks, Mike.
Yeah, Jonathan Haidt's work is really impactful, particularly, like, I think he's been one of the main people championing banning phones in schools in different parts of the world. And I think, you know, there's a lot to be said for, I guess, banning social media as a strategy. I think, you know, it has some merit, or it may have some merit in terms of just doing something about this, you know, big scary problem of social media and youth mental health. But I think a lot of the great work that researchers have done at Orygen to try and understand, you know, the way that social media can look in terms of, you know, if we weren't to ban it, if we were just to force platforms to make themselves safer and to build in better regulation of harmful content and things like that, what could that look like? Because I think the reality is for particularly a lot of young people that might be from, I guess, you know, vulnerable populations or equity-owed populations, social media can often be a real lifeline in terms of having an outlet for connection with their communities, for example. And so if we are just to ban it, then I think it might be cutting off, you know, a lifeline for a lot of young people that really need it as a source of connection. And B, if we're not actually forcing the platforms to make it safer, you know, by design, then what happens when young people turn 16 and they're able to access it? Like, are they just going out into this wild west that it currently is? Like, and it's sort of, in my mind, it doesn't necessarily seem like that is, it's sort of just kicking the can down the road a little bit. So, you know, and it hasn't been sort of a huge focus of my work, and there's obviously a lot more complexity there that I'm maybe not the best person to speak to, but I think, you know, what I would like to see is more focus on not necessarily just trying to ban it, which, you know, we have legislated a ban in Australia, so it is happening. But I hope that where we move in the future is more putting the onus more on platforms and really forcing them to build in safety by design and not continue just to let harmful content run rampant, because it's a bit of a mess at the moment.
But it seems like many things, the two things you just described, the banning thing, that's going to have an impact, will it? Maybe, probably. And then the design of the platforms, I think that's really critical. But what about parental role modelling? You know, I think that's an issue that we're just sort of missing a little bit. What we're role modelling to our kids the moment they are born, how they're seeing their parents using the technology, or is technology being used, you know, dare I say, babysitting? It's still happening. I was in a play centre with my granddaughter a few months ago, one of those massive ones, and I said to my daughter, look around, and at each table there was parents having coffee. Everyone's got their phone in their face. So it's their earliest memory. We have to be getting better as parents.
I think so. Like, it is really complicated, because I think, you know, I don't have kids myself, but, you know, my sister has a nearly 3-year-old, so my niece Ava is nearly 3, and she might be listening, so hello to Ava.
Hi, Ava.
But I think, like, I know that sometimes it just can be so exhausting and challenging having young kids that sometimes you just need a little bit of rest and peace and quiet. And so I think, you know, there's obviously maybe a Goldilocks zone with regards to screen time for particularly children and young people, where maybe there's a certain amount that is a net benefit on, like, the family sense of well-being, even if maybe it's not the best thing at the time for that child. I don't know. But yes, I think there's so much complexity there, and I think it's just about recognizing when maybe there's a sort of dependence coming in, and when it is actually just useful in getting through the day, really.
So what was your experience of the generation and environment that you were raised in? Very
comfortable and happy, I would say.
I never know what's coming after that. Very bad, good.
No, I think I feel very lucky and very grateful for the environment in which I was raised, like very, you know, comfortable middle class upbringing. I grew up in Geelong. So I lived in Geelong until 2012, end of 2012, when I finished high school, and then moved to Melbourne to start uni. And it was funny, I'd never thought that I would move to Melbourne. I think because I've always been quite an anxious person, and I always had a lot of anxiety about the idea of moving to Melbourne away from all my friends to totally start afresh. But my mum actually really, I think, championed that idea for me. And I think she knew that that's what I needed to do in order to put myself out there, because in a lot of ways, the only way to deal with anxiety is just to, you know, go through with whatever is making you anxious and just do it. And so, yes, that's what I did. I moved to Melbourne. I lived on campus at Melbourne Uni for a couple of years, and then have lived in share houses ever since then. But yes, I had a great upbringing, really enjoyed my time at school, and just, very, very comfortable. So, very lucky to be able to say that.
What messages did you get as you were growing up about what it meant to be a boy and then a man?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, and that's something that I think has motivated me coming into work in this space, is I think for a long time, and it's with the benefit of hindsight that I'm able to sort of say this, but I think for a long time there was sort of messages I was maybe internalizing with regards to, you know, the man that I am and versus the man that I thought I should be. And I think for a long time that sort of maybe held me back in terms of fully embracing my identity as a gay man, for example. So I think that, you know, along the way, like there was, and it was never anyone's, you know, intention or fault or anything like that, but just the way that our society is, the way that our culture naturally is for young men, there's just always a degree of assumption of, you know, the identity of that man. And so I think that had an inadvertent effect of sort of maybe delaying my full, you know, acceptance of who I am and who I was and everything like that. And, which wasn't, you know, the most helpful for me at the time, but
Was that in Melbourne or Geelong?
That was, I mean, in terms of when I came out, that was after I'd moved to Melbourne in 2021, I think. And I feel very lucky to be able to say that the way that was received by my family and my friends and everyone around me, I just couldn't be more grateful for the love and support that came from that. So that was great. But yeah, it's interesting reflecting back in hindsight of, you know, the different, I guess, contexts I was in and the different messages I was maybe receiving that sort of reinforced that who I was should really be, you know, just kept to myself. And I think in a lot of ways, you know, for example, living on campus at Melbourne Uni, it's a very, I guess there's a real expectation that you are, you know, leaning into the party lifestyle and kind of really, you know, living your life essentially. You know, maybe being a bit needlessly vague and euphemistic, but I think maybe people can get the idea of what I'm referring to. And that was, you know, in terms of, I guess, a lot of parts of that, like I had a great time and I had a lot of fun, but there were certain, I guess, norms and expectations around, you know, hooking up and things like that was just not, you know, something that was comfortable for me. So I feel very grateful now to be able to look back on those experiences and understand the role that it played in terms of, you know, my sense of who I am and my comfort with who I am and all of that. But yes, at the time it was pretty challenging.
Yeah. Do you feel that the world has come a lot further since then in terms of attitudes and approaches?
Definitely. I think we've come a really long way, but I think there is so much further, you know, left to go. Like, I think within the sort of gay queer community, there are, I think, different hierarchies, I guess, of privilege even within that community that relative to, you know, the straight people in the world, for example, we're still, I guess, how we would be understood as like equity owed or experiencing, you know, health disparities. But even within the queer community, for example, trans people are much more, I guess, vulnerable and much more equity owed, I would say, than someone like me who's a, you know, white gay man. And so I think, yeah, we just have so much further to go in terms of understanding the most vulnerable within a vulnerable community and the ways that society needs to, I guess, progress towards more openness and acceptance and equity for everyone that is owed it.
And I think most of all, safety.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's, you know, I mean, it can feel like an unsafe world for just about everybody. And any additional thing on top of that just increases that risk, doesn't it?
And I think it just really saddens me that I think there's still so many people out there that are just trying to move through the world and just be who they are, like just live, and they're not even trying to impose anything on anyone, but are still just painted as some sort of group that's trying to inherently take away, you know, rights and resources from other people just by virtue of being who they are and just living in the world. And I think that is just really, the endless and needless politicization of the identities and lives of queer people is something that is not really benefiting. It's not benefiting anyone. It's not benefiting social cohesion. It's just, we need to stop that. So.
And I know that you have done some research in that space. Is it something in the future that you would look towards focusing on?
For sure. I think it's something I haven't actually done I've done a few little bits and pieces here and there, but something that I definitely want to do more, and particularly in the area of relationship breakdown and men's mental health and suicide risk, because from the research that I have done, it doesn't seem that the extent to which relationship breakdown is a risk factor for suicide doesn't necessarily seem to be different for gay men relative to straight men, for example. But I think the factors underpinning that risk of suicide, the reasons why, the pathways there may look slightly different. And so that's something I'm hoping I can look into in the future, because the field is really dominated by the study of the breakdown of heterosexual marriage. So the representation of, same-sex relationships and even just non-marital, like cohabiting relationships, for example, they're just a lot harder to track, and the breakdown of them is a lot harder to track because there's no legal, divorce that is recorded or whatever. So it's just much harder to find data on these people.
What about through Centrelink? Because cohabitating couples generally have to register through Centrelink.
Yeah. I mean, to be honest, that's not something I have looked into yet. But there are definitely ways, I'm sure, of doing data linkage between different systems to try and understand these things. So.
I think gratefully now we're looking at families, like how different families are constructed, what they look like, and I think diversity, equity, inclusion and belonging, especially in the workplace environment, is really coming into play. That it's actually, we're looking at diversity of how people think now, as opposed to what colour is your skin and what's between your legs. I think that's big. We're moving a lot faster there. So I think, again, when we talk about, research and evolution, one's a bit too fast for the other. I think, gratefully we are moving into those spaces.
Yep, I agree.
Even common language. A client came to me the other day and we were looking at their workplace code of conduct, and it was around pregnancy, because it's a particular thing to this date only women can be. And they were questioning about some of the language on how do we refer to the person who's pregnant in terms of pronouns, how do we then frame family, what does that mean? They were really, really very, very curious about what was going to be the right thing to do that included everybody and made them feel inclusive.
Great.
So those sorts of questions are great.
Yeah, really important. And I think it's about just leaning into the discomfort of not necessarily knowing maybe the right thing to say in a particular context, especially with regards to things like that and diversity and inclusion and things, and just a genuine openness and curiosity to get it wrong and to, learn from that, I think is what's most important.
So you've been part of the University of Melbourne for quite some time, and of course Orygen, you gave them a bit of a description before. But what's the thread connecting it all through? Like, where did it start and where is it now?
It's a good question. Well, I mean, I started studying psychology at the University of Melbourne in 2013, and then did that. That was over 3 years, and then I did what's called honours, which is sort of a capstone year of, I guess, sort of basic research training that you do on top of your undergrad. And it's at that point you sort of decide whether you are going to go down the path of research, which is what I did, or go down the path of clinical training to become a psychologist, for example, or both. And I, as I said, originally wanted to go down the sort of more therapist, become a psychologist sort of route, but just found that I was on the research train. I was enjoying it. I was, able to work with great people. And I just found it was really motivating, and I just really got a lot from it. So I just stayed on that train. But yeah, I think what connects it all is just a genuine kind of openness and curiosity for people and people's experiences, and just really I think in a lot of ways, like a lot of people that get into research, there's this phrase that any research is me search sort of thing, where like you're inherently trying to understand yourself through other people, which I don't know how, there's that's not sort of the main thing driving me. I think for me, it's more about just trying to shine a light on under-researched issues and populations and vulnerabilities. But I think, to an extent, there's parts of my lived experience, particularly in terms of the study of relationship breakdown and suicide, that I think motivate me. And it's not really, it's not the case that I had a really horrific breakup and that's what drove me. People often assume that, but that's not actually the case. It's more supporting friends who have been through really intense breakups and have been quite unwell, and I have been quite worried about them, and experiencing myself the discomfort of not knowing what to say, not knowing how to help, and particularly with some of the men in my life, not knowing how to like really hold their distress and respond to it in a healthy, adaptive way. And what I've found is, through the research that I've done, that is a really common experience for people in not knowing how to respond to a man that's maybe going through or been through relationship breakdown, and knowing how to actually, validate his emotional pain and how to actually respond to it in a way that's adaptive. And so I think for me, that is one of the main reasons I was really interested in this link between breakups and suicide for men, because most of the research that had been done on this topic to date would generally assume that the whole idea of loneliness and social disconnection that can arise post-breakup, that is the factor that explains the path to suicide for some men. And so I was sort of thinking, well, people might assume that it's just an issue of men's lack of help seeking, for example, but it's actually not the case. We know that men are seeking help more than ever, and especially in the context of a breakup, I think, sometimes men just seek any support they can get. But what had not enough attention, in my view, is the response that is provided to men who do seek help. And so often it's this idea of just, getting back out there immediately, just get back on the horse and just get over it, essentially, which really just reinforces this archetype of the somehow emotionally immune archetype of masculinity, and the guy that just somehow is just unbothered by his breakup, which I think, might be the case for some guys out there, but every man I've spoken to, all of the young men I've interviewed, everyone got that advice, but no one resonated with it. And so I think that is one, I think, learning from doing this PhD that I think needs to change is just more understanding and more awareness of how to respond to someone who's going through really significant distress. And I think it's a really common issue regardless of what we're talking about. But I think there's something specific and unique potentially about the context of a man, and maybe a more traditionally masculine man, going through a breakup, and the dynamic of, providing support there that actually resonates. I think there's something unique in that context. So that's sort of one example of an experience I've had of that discomfort, and the motivation that I have sort of gained from that in trying to just understand, why did I feel so comfortable in that, so uncomfortable in that context, and is that a common experience for others, and what can we do about it, basically.
I really liked your use of the term respond, because I think traditionally there's always a reaction to a man in that situation. The reaction is you need to, you should, you have to. Not a lot of listening goes on. There's just a very strong direction to what a man needs to do in that situation, or not to do. But the response piece, I think we're getting better at, and again through this work that you've created, that's really just put a lot of context and colour and meaning behind what it can be, gives people a much better insight. I mean, even reading it, because there's one piece of research I did read, it can almost read like a how-to guide, or a how not to guide, that we need to be looking through the lens of a particular individual who's experiencing, rather than expecting that this is, generally what all men will go through, and what they all need is to, as you said, go down to the pub and have a few beers and get back on it.
And I think it's really complicated because there's a certain amount of advice to what you just described there, going down the pub, for example, is a really common, I think, behavior, particularly between men post breakup. And I think there's a certain amount of that distraction, that maybe numbing of distress, that avoidance-oriented coping that we would typically think, oh, no, we don't want that. We want people to just delve into their emotions and really process and really, learn and grow from it. But I think it's about balance, and it's about being realistic in terms of what someone is just feeling capable of doing at a particular point in time. Because most of the young men I've spoken to about how they recovered from their breakups, for example, one of the main strategies was distraction. There was just a certain amount of that I think was adaptive in terms of allowing them just to function, through their day, just so they could keep going and not be totally assumed, but totally, what's the word? Consumed, by the emotions they were experiencing. And so I think, people's knee-jerk reaction to the idea of men getting together at the pub post-breakup can be like, oh, they're just avoiding it, they're just, whatever. But I think we have to, push where there's movement, sort of thing. Even for some men, even getting together with their friends at the pub post-breakup can feel really, really huge, and that can feel like a really, a really profound source of connection, even if it doesn't look like what we would maybe expect men's vulnerability and emotional expression to look like, if that makes sense. So,
but we do have to bear in mind that alcohol can sometimes, or oftentimes, contribute to behaviours or emotional dysregulation.
Oh yeah,
as well, which you speak a lot about in the paper. We do actually, because time is not our friend at the moment, Michael. Because we could just go on for about 3 hours, couldn't we?
This show does go for 4 hours, doesn't it?
At least.
Got plenty of time.
But such powerful insights, and, thank you for sharing this. Anyone who wants to have a look at this paper, just Google Michael Wilson, Orygen, and male relationship breakdown and suicide. Just Google those words and it will come up. And then you've got to sort of wade through how to download the PDF and everything like that.
Yeah, and it's also a really long, really dense piece of research. So,
just shove it through AI then.
Enter at your own risk. But yeah, maybe shove it in AI. That'll do the job.
So we're going to take a short break for a song. But when we come back, I've got a little surprise for you. You look scared.
You are full of surprises.
I am full of surprises. But before that, though, remember our very special guest song request game and how that works. So here is your clue.
You'd hope I'd get this one, given there's only 3 songs and I've already done one. So that's process of elimination.
That's right. If collaboration had a soundtrack.
Is this Unison?
It is.
Love this song. Yep.
Now, what is that about? I mean, evidently, Unison, which it's a Celine Dion song.
Celine Dion, yeah.
That was her first English album. I didn't know that.
Yep, came out in 1990 something, early 1990s.
It was 91.
Yeah, and I just love this song. There's nothing, particularly deep and meaningful about it for me, but I just think it's a really amazing just banger, and she's just got such a beautiful voice. I really love when she just belts it out towards the end of this song. And I think there is a nice message of kind of cohesion and working together in collaboration that I think, if we're coming back to research, that is what gets people through it.
And that's why I made that clue, because I love a collab. I mean, there's communication, isn't there? And there's collaboration. They're kind of different things that intersect. We need both. So stay tuned. Hopefully the surprise is going to work out at the other end of this song.
I'm intrigued.
You're listening to 94.1 FM. It's 3WBC. We'll be right back. Welcome back. You're listening to 94.1 FM. It's 3WBC. And you're with Rae Bonney with What Does It Feel Like Being You Today with Michael Wilson, who's been taking us deep into the world of men's mental health research. And Michael, remember the little surprise I mentioned? Well, hopefully joining us on the line right now is somebody who's been with you every step of the PhD journey, your supervisor and one of the leading voices in global men's health, Dr. Zach Zeidler. Zach, are you there?
Morning, Ray. Hey, Michael.
Oh, my gosh. I cannot tell you how relieved I am that we actually brought you to air. Welcome.
We made it happen.
Now, the first really important question I have for you, Zach, does Michael always get his homework in on time, or sometimes does the dog eat it?
No, the dog never eats it. Michael actually gets it in early, which is somewhat frustrating because I then have to shift my calendar to get onto it, to be as quick and responsive as he is as a student. So no, it's always been a joy working with Michael. I don't know if he told you, but he was a research assistant with me for a long time before he became a PhD student. So we've had a lot of years of getting to know each other, and it's been beautiful watching his development. And there's never been a moment where there's been any frustration or uncertainty or anything like that about his capacity. And we're now at a point, Ray, where he is the master. He is the teacher. He teaches me.
Reverse the table.
I'll send you your check in the mail, Zach.
Yeah.
I'm paying him to say all of this.
So, Michael, hearing that from Zach, what is it actually like being supervised?
I think it's a joy, really. Like, I think I always thought I had the capacity to do a PhD, but I think what I lacked is the confidence and the really, the motivation and the sort of belief in myself that I could actually do it. I think I always had this idea in my head that it was this huge, enormous, insurmountable task that I just, didn't have the capacity for. But I think Zach just really helped me understand that I just, you just have to back yourself, and you can actually do something, and your own anxiety should not be a barrier to doing it. So that's probably, it's an amazing lesson, and I'm very grateful for that.
So Zach, as Michael's supervisor, how does it feel to hear him speak about his research that you've been so closely involved with?
Oh, I've just been a cheerleader, right? I'm just a motivational coach, as you said. I'm just, like, our supervision hour is just me telling him that he's got this and that it's all under control, which is a very, privileged place to be. There are many other students where they have to be in the weeds all the time and, focusing on the detail and making sure that they've done the methodology right, or they've recruited the right sample, or they've written it in a certain way. But I think because Michael and I have spent so much time creating together. Michael was central in the Men in Mind program, which was an extension of my PhD and is now out in the world as a training program on how to connect with men and engage with them in therapy, a training for psychologists. And so Michael kind of ended up witnessing how my brain worked, I think, for a very long time. And we speak the same language now, and I like to think he was always kind of an extension of my brain. I always felt that I could trust and understand, what he was saying and what he was trying to do. So it's definitely just a joy to be able to, be a part of the journey and sitting in on the details of what he's bitten off here, really, because he went after a very, very complex, nuanced, and nascent topic that very few had the gall to kind of to challenge and to question and to deep dive on. And it's definitely paying dividends, because they always say that you come out of a PhD being a world leader in something, but if you're doing a topic where there are thousands of PhDs all vying for that mantle, it's a very different question to where Michael has stepped in and there is a vacuum. There is nobody doing this type of work. And it's not only that there is nobody doing this work, he has also lent into it with such rigor and such care and depth of thought and feeling around it that it's just, he owns it. And I think that the world is cottoning onto that now as well.
Well, he's crying now, so I'm going to have to probably... I'll let you respond.
My job as a therapist.
I need a minute.
So I'm just going to hand the tissues over so he can respond.
Very kind, thanks.
Well, so I can sort of lead you in then, Michael, with what Zach said there. What's one thing that Zach has taught you that has changed how you approach research or even life itself?
Well, I think as I said before, like the idea that, you know, anxiety should not be a barrier to, I guess, progress in your own life. Like, I think there's obviously different levels of anxiety that people can go through, but I think for me, it's often been, you know, a lot of imposter syndrome and self-doubt and sort of all of that. But I think I've just, you know, through this mentorship and this great, you know, work we've done together, I feel like I'm now able to just say, you know, yes, I'm going to be, you know, shitting myself in certain contexts, but that doesn't mean I can't do it, or that doesn't mean I shouldn't just, you know, get into the weeds and get into it. So I think that, but also just the confidence to, you know, sometimes speak on issues and voice my opinion on certain issues that I think, you know, need to be addressed and need to be spoken about and need to be delved into with, I think, a lot of rigor. And I think this issue of relationship breakdown and male suicide, as Zach said, is one that can be politicized and can be viewed from so many different angles. But I think what we've lacked is some really clear, you know, concrete data that can actually speak for itself in terms of understanding and explaining this issue. So that's what I've aimed to do. So.
Yeah, exactly. We've just been sort of covering that recent piece of research and had a couple of questions from the audience as well. And, you know, Michael is just so incredibly articulate around this and, you know, able to paint and illustrate really good reasons why people should be picking up this and working out what it really means in their lives. But, you know, Zach, you yourself have been a leading contributor to much of the recent global men's health research, including Movember's Real Face of Men's Health. And that's now been launched in 6 countries, UK, Australia, Canada, Ireland, New Zealand, and now the US, pairing the really hard numbers with human stories to show what's really costing men their lives. And just a few weeks ago in New York, I saw that you unveiled the US edition with a surprise appearance there as well, just like on this show. But from somebody less important than you, Prince Harry. How did such a public figure so closely linked to men's mental health advocacy change the significance of that launch?
Yeah, thanks, Ray. It was a pretty wild experience, you know. I think that when it comes down to this relationship as well between Michael and I, you know, my aim is to show that there are only self-created bounds when it comes to what is possible. And, you know, I've had plenty of anxiety and imposter syndrome in my career. Lots of people now don't believe that is possible because I am very confident and believe what I say and what I do. But it takes work to get through that and to be able to project that to my students and for them to know, you know, that I went through those trials and tribulations and continue to, you know, to this day, and that's a part of you is really important. But these reports have been, you know, a mammoth effort with a lot of different partners trying to get them over the line, and ended up in New York 2 weeks ago to launch the US report. And through various conversations with various partners, it became clear that Harry wanted to join the conversation and, you know, to have him in the room and the authenticity and earnest, honest, you know, response where he was describing, you know, his childhood. He was talking about his time in the armed forces and what he learned, about, you know, men and masculinity as well. It was just such a privilege to sit, you know, beside him, and what that does for our work, you know, it just turns up the heat massively. Like the amount of media attention that we got off the back of that, the amount of, you know, partners in philanthropy who are suddenly wanting to join the conversation, it cannot be underestimated. So we're just always trying to find new ways to open new doors in this space. And, you know, I think again, that idea that anything is possible here if you ask, if you lean into those conversations and, realize that this is a very human experience and whether it's relationship breakdown or other, you know, the vast majority of people have felt this and experienced it, and we just need to give them access, to the ability to express it one way or another, no matter how rich, famous royalty they may be, because we're all very similar at the end of the day.
Yeah, it was amazing. I was watching the video. I couldn't believe how close you were sitting to him. And
I had very, very many pinch me moments where I was like, I love The Crown, and this was the boy that they were depicting. What is happening right now?
Yeah.
It was nice to be present in that as well.
I also saw it got a shout out in Marie Claire and, a few other magazines like that. So again, I think it's just really such a fortuitous happening to, in that final piece, which I'm sure it's not the final piece of the real face of men's health. There's so many other countries in the world. But, Zach, actually, this is a question for both of you. From what you're both seeing in the data and on the ground, what's the one mindset shift men need and one system shift services need to actually move the needle?
I can go first with that. I think the mindset shift, is this idea that being this protector and provider, being this man of the house who is wanting to self-sacrifice to make sure that others, are being looked after. I think that men are starting to understand that the best way to look after others is to look after yourself, and that the pain and suffering and emotional labor and all of the ramifications of having, poor health and well-being that stem from really not taking care and respecting really, your everyday experience and clocking where I'm at and what I need, is really, is harming our communities. And that's, that plays out in this relationship breakdown work that Michael's done. It plays out in our Real Faces report, which, Movember really talks to the fact that there are so many ripple effects of, the way in which men behave, the choices that they make. And lots of these behaviors do not feel, like they are decisions. They feel forced. They feel like they are not within their grasp. And we really want to open the door for them and help them realize that there are so many choices, that they do have so much capacity. And we're trying to lean into this strength-based idea around what men are capable of, what their aspirations can be, how they can flourish. And so when it comes to systems, I think the same thing can be said there, which is that we need to make sure that health systems and education systems specifically, which I think are the two main levers here, are really responsive to, men's socialization, their experiences, where they come from, what matters to them, but also that they are there to not reinforce stereotypes. They are there to uplift men, to find ways to empower them, to lean into their strengths and double down on the things that they're good at, while also obviously paying attention to some of the things that need work. So I think that entire mind shift across society of not taking some of these ideas around men's emotional lives, men's capacity for change. I just think that we are leading into a self-fulfilling prophecy in some ways, and we have far more opportunity to challenge these things by leaning into a much more positive narrative.
Well said. I think for me as well, like just to echo a few of those points, I think for a long time, as I was sort of talking about earlier, Rae, men's health research has often been looked at in comparison to women's, and I think that has sort of perpetuated this idea that focusing on men's health and men's needs is somehow at the expense of women's health and women's needs. And I think what really needs to shift, as I said, is more of a focus on, I guess, a relational perspective on men's health, and the fact that men's health does not exist in isolation from the women, the children, that men relate to. And so I think why I love these Real Face of Men's Health reports is they are, really clear, concrete, hard data that actually validates the idea that men's health is not a zero-sum game. If we help men to be better, sons, fathers, partners, whatever, then the people in men's lives directly benefit from that. And a lot of the time it is the women and children in their lives that benefit as a result of that, because of these ideas that a lot of men still strive to live up to around being a protector, provider, man of the house, family man. So as Zach said, it's a really kind of nice strength-based way of looking at these masculine norms and not necessarily wanting to just, I guess, totally throw out this archetype of masculinity that does still mean a lot to a lot of men. But yes, I think we need to continue to move forward in that direction of recognizing that it is not zero-sum, and you are not taking, empathy is not a finite resource, and taking, focusing on one group's needs is not at the expense of another.
That's a good wrap up, Michael. One last one for you, Zach, and thank you for that as well. That really resonated with me. If you could bottle one quality from Michael as a researcher or even as a person, what would it be, and why does that matter for men's health?
Beautiful. Michael is sitting just cringing through this, which I love. What a joy. Well, his sense of humour is incredible, and that makes life a lot easier. I will say that. But I think the way in which his care and desire to do really good, meaningful, society-shifting work actually leads to his attention to detail being an incredible strength. I am a very flighty researcher. I do a lot of things at once. I wouldn't change that about me, but we don't need more of me in the world, I don't think. We need diversity of approaches, and I think that, Michael has always been the yin to my yang, and I think that that's why we're such a good team, and we've been able to achieve so much because we have a different approach. We can call each other out on things when we're doing, certain things that we don't necessarily think is the right way of going about things. And that's strengthened over time to the point where I know what Michael is going to say, really, about certain things. I know how he's going to comment on things. And it's a very, really comfortable and respectful environment that means that our research just blossoms, really, as a result, because it's seamless. And so I think that we need that type of, brain in this field. We needed far more rigor when it came to some of these questions. And I think, honestly, like Michael's meta-analysis specifically, will have, serious ramifications for the way in which we consider this topic moving forward. And without the careful, pained deliberation that Michael brings to his work, this could have been torn to shreds. It could have been a weak piece. It could have really not done what it set out to do. But because of his, tenacious, research mentality, it meant that it was an incredible piece of work. And that's where we're at now, where I'm very lucky that I'm going to get to work with Michael in an ongoing capacity to really do more of this moving forward. So the bromance continues, which I'm very excited about.
So Zach, what is he going to say next then?
What is he going to say next?
Yeah.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
You don't know me at all.
I was just testing out the theory. You said that you don't.
Yeah.
But anyway,
I can't give away all my secrets.
No, that was just a bit of radio fun.
No, thanks, Zach. Appreciate it.
But Zach, thanks so much for making time to jump into the show today. I personally really appreciate your time and your incredible work. That I was saying to Michael earlier on in the show, how much I appreciate being able to lean on, all of the stats, the facts, the figures, the research that you guys so tirelessly just churn out for our enjoyment, and to back some of our work that we want to advocate with. So thank you for that.
Of course, Rae. And I just want to say to all of your listeners that you have been in this field for a very long time and been doing incredible advocacy work that globally is being appreciated more and more. So thank you for all of your efforts over the years, and keep it up. We're very, very grateful for that.
Oh, wow. Thank you. That was very unexpected, but I'm very grateful to hear that, and also very honoured coming out of your mouth too. I'm so grateful.
It's a love fest, Ray. It's Sunday morning. That's what we're here for.
Well, I'm going to slap you now because when I emailed you and asked you for your very special guest song request, you didn't
do it.
So I'm going to really try and cue a quick song for you, if we can do this live on air, and I can go to my Spotify and search up a song to add. What would it be?
Oh, let's go with. I've got to look up what the actual name of there's a new song that I love, which I think Michael is very much in Michael's vibe, because Michael, I don't know if he told you, but he's actually a DJ in his spare time as well.
Well, I wanted to find a way to massage that into the show, and now you've done it for me, so thank you.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
I was just waiting for someone to bring it up.
Let's go with, it's called You Got Me Feeling by Parcels.
Oh, yeah, I love them.
Me Feeling.
Their new album is great.
Parcels.
Okay, I'm typing this in, Got Me Feeling. Okay, so.
Have you seen them live, sir?
Oh, okay, there it is.
I have. They're coming to Sydney Opera House in a month as well. So I'm going to be going with my very pregnant wife, which I'm looking forward to.
Well, do you want to say congratulations? You're going to be a dad.
Thank you. I know. Pretty crazy, yeah.
Yeah, well, that's
mental health in action.
Well, we'll be seeing a whole different side of you probably this time next year. So, or this year. When is your baby?
January. Yep, it'll be next year.
Look, I've got a child on the 6th of January and one on the 8th of January. So
wow, I'm due on the 7th, so
bang,
right in the middle.
Bang in the middle.
Well, you're looking for if the star signs are right, you're looking for a pretty banging kid, I can tell you.
Yep.
All right, well, Zach, now I'm going to have to juggle hanging up on you, playing a song, turning Michael and I off all at once on the panel. So
I believe in you, Ray.
I believe in you too, and thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you for having me.
Made the show even better than it could have been with Michael.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay. All the best.
Thanks, Zach. See ya.
Bye, Zach.
Hey, Michael. Bye, guys.
Bye. Oh, what a wonderful guy, and what great insight as well. And he's as articulate as you are, even though he doesn't really know what you're thinking.
Yep, we'll let him off the hook for that one.
All right, so we're going to go to a little song break now. Here goes. This is You Got Me Feeling by The Parcels. Don't go away. You come back. You're listening to 94.1 FM. It's 3WBC. Oh, welcome back. You're listening to 94.1 FM. It's 3WBC. And you're listening to Rae Bonney on What Does It Feel Like Being You Today. We've just heard from Dr. Zach Zeidler, Global Director of Men's Health Research at Movember, whose work is shaping how the world understands and supports men's well-being. And still with me in the studio is Michael Wilson. He's Research Fellow in Men's Mental Health at Orygen and one of the new generation of men's health researchers helping to redefine what evidence really means in men's lives. But also you've now got a new little feather in your cap, haven't you? Speaking of Movember, or is that why you have a moustache?
When I first started working with Zach was on his Men in Mind project, developing training for mental health practitioners.
Amazing, by the way, yeah.
Yeah, and so I was working with Orygen, but funded by Movember. So I was going into their head office in Richmond a couple of days a week, and it overlapped with the month of November that I was there, and I was like, cool, I'll get around this. I've always loved the cause, so just felt great to be a part of it. And so I grew a mo. I never knew that I could, but I always thought that I couldn't, to be honest. But it happened, and I've sort of, I feel like now it's who I am, and it goes through an annual renaissance every Movember when I shave it off and regrow it, because you have to start clean on the 1st of November. Yeah. But yes, I'm just another guy in Melbourne with a mustache.
That's right. I didn't know you have to start clean. I didn't, I've been involved with Movember right from the very beginning. And I didn't know that piece of information.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how strict that is, but I think like for staff working there, it's often a bit of fun on the first day. I think they get people in and do the whole shave down where, people fully start clean. So
yeah,
that is the idea, and it pops better if it's on a clean face.
Well, I don't know about that. I do have to get the tweezers out every now and then. Go, oh dear. So you're starting an official role with Movember.
I am, yeah.
Next month or this month.
Mm-hmm. Really excited, yeah. So that will be Research Fellow in Men's Health and Relationships with Movember.
So it is based on your recent work?
Building on it, yeah. I think what I'm really looking forward to, I guess, about that is, I guess, looking a little bit more upstream of relationship breakdown, for example, to understand the role that healthy relationships can play in men's mental health and suicide prevention, and how do we help men particularly young men, how do we help them form and maintain healthy relationships? What do healthy relationships look like? And then how can we help, men in their middle years, for example, when we know separation and divorce can be really common? How can we help men at that age to really tune into maybe signs that a relationship is fracturing or breaking down, and how can we help them to build up sort of protective factors to hopefully get out ahead of crisis that I have studied to date. So I'm really excited about that. I'll be working with a team that are based in the UK office as well, who are developing sort of an initiative designed to help young men, I guess, have better conversations and sort of understand the development of relationships and how to handle different relationship dilemmas, I guess. So yes, really excited about that. And it feels like a good time to be talking to you today and to sort of to be talking about this because, I'm sort of in that transition period now where the PhD is mostly done, and I'm just sort of looking forward to starting what's next now. So yeah, really excited.
That is a great transition. For me personally, my private practice, I would say would be 95% are men in relationship breakdown.
Okay, wow.
And there's lots of different versions of that, but it never looks good. And, I feel enormously grateful to be able to, constantly be referred men in this situation, because evidently I'm pretty good at it.
Clearly. I mean, and we know that men talk to each other in terms of like men often want a warm referral to a counsellor to work with, so I'm not surprised.
Yeah, always referred. In fact, I have to be very careful in session that I'm not, if I'm using any examples, that I'm not using an example of your mate,
Yeah, true.
Just in terms of de-identifying.
Yeah.
No, very, very careful about that. But it's another example how men have each other's back. And I was just saying that to you in the break, observing you and Zach, even though he's on the end of the telephone and you're here in front of me, you could feel that connection that you have, that care, that respect, for each other. And, that's what men are like.
Totally.
But that's not the narrative.
Yeah, I think often the narrative is that men are only, this whole idea of self-reliance, for example, is one of the sort of, I guess, quote unquote masculine norms that is so often studied and so often linked with, risk of suicide and reduced rates of help seeking and everything. But I think these masculine qualities and masculine norms rarely exist in isolation from other qualities and norms. So yes, men might be self-reliant when it comes to certain aspects of their lives, but I think, it is also a really common and an amazing masculine virtue, I guess, to just drop everything be at the support and the beck and call of someone else, regardless of what's going on for you.
Yeah.
And so I think often, certain masculine norms are sort of, maybe we focus on them too much at the expense of others, and we sort of, I guess, see the problem in everything, when in reality there is a sort of strength-based way we can work with where we're at now in order to help people better support one another, I guess. Yeah.
Do you know what a big one in my room has been is lawn bowls.
Okay. Yeah.
Men and lawn bowls, men of all ages. You know, I think my youngest client at the moment is 15 and the oldest one is 95. But lawn bowl seems to be a place that's very inclusive.
Okay.
It's very accessible. It's very kind. It's very gentle, and it doesn't require any, real, commitment unless you're getting to competition sort of level.
What comes to mind for me there is I think I don't know if this is what it looks like, but there might be, if there's older men that are, teaching younger men how it works, for example, and how it looks. Like I know my granddad in New Zealand, for example, did play bowls and golf for a long time and really got a lot out of teaching me that, which, might have been frustrating at times. One, because I was terrible at it, and two, because I was a teenager and I didn't necessarily like it wasn't exactly where I, kind of wanted to be at the time, just because I was, a teenager. But in hindsight, there is such beauty in that sort of masculine passing down of knowledge and skill and learning. And I think, that can be a really powerful source of connection between men.
Yes.
So,
And when I met you originally on our Zoomer, I mentioned to you some of my concerns around the relationship breakdown piece, which is not always, well, quite often it's not just about the relationship breakdown with the special, I was going to say the special partner, the significant partner, but it's the relationship breakdown with children, particularly when men have been separated from their kids for all kinds of different reasons. And what you were just describing then, that passing down of things, that all disappears. Connection, men that lose connection to their dogs,
I know,
even their in-laws who they've had good relationships with. So there's so many relationships that just disappear.
Yep.
They don't even get fragmented. They just don't exist anymore. And quite often that's coupled with, also having to move out of their home and their safety and their security, and then the expectation to still continue, turning up for your occupation, which oftentimes is very hard, especially in the blue collar, high risk, heavy industry space, which translates to lack of safety if a man is not present, if he's not feeling well when he turns up into those environments. Now we've got a new problem around health and safety there.
Yep, absolutely.
Do you sort of, that all gets very, very complex, but, is there any sort of plans to sort of start looking at all of the social determinants and biological determinants that feed into just relationship breakdown?
It's a really good point, and I think, with what you were saying there, I think relationship breakdown is a context of really heightened interpersonal disconnection, and I think there's that interpersonal disconnection can be, can look very different. It can be disconnection from obviously partner as the first, layer, but then disconnection from kids, disconnection from shared friends with that ex-partner, disconnection from their family. And we know that connection is the main antidote to suicide risk. It's one of the leading risk factors for suicide is social isolation and loneliness. And so that was something I was really interested in studying relationship breakdown is what does it do to a guy's social network? What does it do to loneliness and isolation? Where does that come from? How can it look different for different groups of men? What does it look like for fathers versus for younger men, for example? What does it look like for some men who maybe do things they regret in the context of relationship breakdown, who are then maybe, feel that friends have turned their back on them, which is a really complex, but common issue. Can
you elaborate on that a little bit?
Well, I think, some of the young men I've spoken to have talked about how, in the context of relationship breakdown, if they contributed to the breakdown of the relationship inadvertently through, maybe cheating on the partner or just doing something they regret, or, their own mental health struggles that inadvertently grew to become incompatible with the relationship. I think, often the witnessing of that from shared friends can lead to real complexity and a real sense of friends taking sides and things like that in the event of a breakup. And it's
Does
really,
shame play a role in that?
Definitely. I think I'm thinking of one young man I spoke to in particular who felt that friends had taken sides, and that he already had, I guess, what we understand as a degree of underlying trait shame, where he really struggled to connect because of a deep sense of sense of unlovableness, I suppose, if that's a word.
It is now.
It is now, yeah, because I said it. And then I think in the context of, some poor behavior and some poor decision making on his part in the context of a breakup, he felt that, friends witnessing that, they sort of claimed the narrative of his breakup, and that sort of layered an additional sense of shame that he had committed a wrong, and, he was just further isolated as a result of that, which is obviously really complex and really hard, and I think is just really further evidence of the fact that men's health and men's relational health in particular does not exist in isolation, and it does not exist in isolation not only of the men that, the people that men are in relationships with, but also the social network around them and the extent that can really be fractured and impacted in the context of a breakup. So it's really complex, and it just highlights how difficult this issue is to study, I think, because often we only get data from one person in this context. Like the men I've interviewed, for example, I'm only hearing their story and I'm taking that at face value, but the reality is a lot of the time there's another party involved, and there's obviously different sides and different perspectives to every story, and often hearing from those other perspectives can tell us a lot about actually what might need to change and what that man might need. It's just, it's an inherent challenge of studying this issue, but
But it is the person's truth.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And, whatever you're hearing from the person is that. Mm-hmm. I wonder also out loud how, those feelings of shame that you're talking about are exacerbated by, say, the media narrative where men should feel shame about everything. We've got the blue fingernail cause happening at the moment, which is to signify that men need to be stepping up more around, or reducing domestic violence, which, I'm not sure how I feel about that. But it's just, just reinforcing that men need to be ashamed. And then if men are actually feeling shame in instances like you're describing, it's sort of just doubled down then, hasn't it?
And I think, it's obviously really, really complex, but I think what is often overlooked in these sorts of discussions is what shame, like the actual lived experience of shame for some men, and what that emotion actually does, and what it can feel like, and often it is a really profoundly negative emotion that just leads to a real desire to withdraw and to run away. And often in some cases, that drive to run away is really complicated, because maybe these are men that we do need to engage and we do need to speak to in order to, whether that's to improve their mental health, whether that's to reduce, behaviors that are unacceptable, whatever that is. I think targeting shame and helping, better regulation of shame can be, I guess, what we understand as, maybe a transdiagnostic sort of approach to actually improving not only men's mental health, but how they relate to others in the world as well. So.
And running away can be quite dangerous, because running away can mean, running away to substance misuse. It can be running away just to be completely isolated. All different kinds of things, all at the worst case, death. And that's the permanent running away, isn't it? That so many men end up. And, I would never use the word choose. I think that's a word that's very overused when it comes to male suicide. It's not I don't think in my experience of hearing, or reading notes afterwards, it's ever been a choice.
Yeah, that's interesting.
There was one question I also had, because this does, unfortunately, I do get to read a lot of suicide notes, but a common theme for me is always I was not believed.
Okay, yeah.
My pain wasn't believed. My situation wasn't believed. It wasn't believed how bad it was for me. Did any of that come up for you in your research?
That's really powerful, and I think it hasn't necessarily come up directly, but I think what that says to me is that, there's this whole narrative that men don't talk, that men aren't speaking up, that men aren't seeking help, and all of this, all of this narrative. But what that says to me is men are, but maybe it's just not looking how we expect, or it's not looking how we want it to, or it's not fitting into a box that, has been designed for, often people that are seeking help, they might be expressing their distress in a way that doesn't conform to our expectations of the way that someone should express distress in a particular context. So, for example, I'm thinking about men's depression and a lot of Simon Rice's work around the male type depression scale. He's done some amazing work essentially on this idea that men's depression often looks very different to women's and is often expressed through what we know as externalizing behaviors. So things like anger, irritability, substance use, which can be quite challenging things to respond to as a mental health practitioner, for example, but I think the onus there should be on the mental health practitioner to really upskill themselves around how to actually respond to that and recognize that this is, potentially, yes, it might not be the most comfortable thing to respond to, and often it can lead to harm to self or others, but it needs to be taken as, in some contexts, the cry for help that it is. And I think, so it just speaks to the idea of broadening out our narratives around what men's distress and men's asking for help looks like.
How has Men in Mind helped educate? Have you collected any sort of data from that?
We have, heaps of data, So that was a project I started working on with Zach originally, really with the aim being to understand how for the more and more men every year that are seeking help from mental health practitioners, we're still seeing that among men who die by suicide, for example, really high rates of those men who had actually sought help from mental health practitioners. So I think what that really shows is, men's help seeking and getting men through the door sometimes isn't enough. We need to look at what's happening once they do seek help, once they come through the door. How confident and skilled are practitioners to provide support that works with rather than against masculinity? And so that was the whole idea behind this training program that we developed with Movember. And so, yes, the data that we collected essentially on practitioners that have been through it, we published a randomized control trial, which is sort of the gold standard way of studying an intervention to understand, does it affect the outcomes we're hoping that it does? And we did find that it had a really significant impact on practitioners' levels of confidence and self-efficacy to engage and respond to men that sought help. And what I think was most encouraging is we're able to show, improvement on practitioners' capacity to, sit with men's suicidality and to feel equipped to respond, because we know that a lot of men's help seeking is often crisis driven. Often men will delay seeking help and will exhaust all of the limits of self-reliance until, they feel that, things are bad enough that they should seek help. And so with that in mind, it's really important that practitioners are aware of how to, do safety planning and how to engage men who are suicidal in the context of seeking help. And so, yes, really, I'm really proud that we're able to develop this program with Movember that, does have an impact on practitioners' confidence and competence. And, it's only going from strength to strength now. We're working to develop similar training for GPs around engaging and responding to men and recognizing signs of mental ill health in men, for example. And there's more work planned for other aspects of the primary care workforce going forward.
Wow,
so
it's really exciting. It's a game changer, really, isn't it? I mean, you could say the same for so many other issues. I mean, GPs are general practitioners, can't know everything. But, when you're generally dealing with, either one or another, you need to understand, the approach generally rather than no approach at all.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's really about broadening, the expectation for so long has been on men to fit into a system that fundamentally, in a lot of ways, especially with regards to therapy and mental health related help seeking, it's a system that just wasn't designed for your average bloke who might be, self-reliant and, not be the most comfortable sitting down and delving into his emotions and vulnerabilities and all of that. It's just in many ways has been described as the absolute antithesis of masculinity. And I don't think we should expect men to adapt to that system when system adaptation is kind of much more amenable to change and much more possible. And especially with psychologists, for example, they're constantly expected to do professional development and improve their learning. And I know it's the case for other professions as well. And so I think it's really exciting that there's, continued investment in this sort of work to really look at, we may not be able to change men. There's a certain amount that, men need to change, but obviously we need to take a multi pronged approach to this and recognize that the system around men that we're expecting them to change to fit into, you know, we got to push where there's movement, and sometimes pushing the system and nudging the system towards change can be the best vehicle for doing that.
Well, dare I say, perhaps we should be looking at how we're still raising boys into men. You know, I have a very proud story about my son Rory, who's only 16, and earlier in the year he wanted to go to the doctor. And I have told this story on air. But so Rory, I said to him, "Are you okay?" And he said, "He's fine. Can you just make me the appointment?" And so when the time came, he actually had written a list of things that he wanted to cover in that session. And he'd written it all out, and he just handed it to the doctor, who he knows, but he said it was really great because, you know, he got all of his questions answered. He didn't have to get in there and try and think of it sort of, you know, straight after school when his head's full of, and he's 16, so he's, you know, smack bang in the middle of puberty and all these other things. And I thought that's really good role modeling for his peers to be able to, because, you know, I know his cohort of friends talk a lot about their mental health, and that's what they do, that generation. They do talk about how they're feeling. So you can sort of see how this, again, cumulatively will sort of move down the track. But I think expecting men to change and be better at that stuff requires showing how to do it rather than telling them what to do when they've got no idea. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. And especially if, you know, if we're thinking about men, I guess, in sort of midlife now, like often the men they were raised by, you know, had even less in terms of mental health literacy and comfort with all these sorts of conversations that I think have really grown in recent years and should grow. But I think, you know, we can't just leave men in their middle years behind. Like there's so many men struggling in that age range, especially when we're thinking about relationship breakdown and divorce and things like that.
Or, you know, men in their 80s who are very vulnerable to suicide. Who've lost their partners through, you know, age. There's all of that. But can you believe we've got 7 minutes left?
Oh, wow. This is fine.
I told you to go fast, that 4 hours. It's dinner time. But speaking of resources and support, if any of the themes and topics discussed today have brought up uncomfortable feelings for you, please remember help is available. Here are a few options available in Australia. Our Lifeline, the number there is 131114. Suicide callback service 1300 659 467. And if you're not sure where to start or what might help, consider calling Head to Health. This is one of my favourite resources. The number there is 1-800-595-212 or visiting headtohealth.gov.au. It's a national free service connecting you with the right mental health support, whether it's online, phone, chats, face-to-face, whatever. They list more than 700 digital programs, apps, forums, phone and email services, and network for walk-in centres too. It's all publicly funded and available to anyone in Australia, including adults, young people, older adults, families and carers. It doesn't replace specialist treatment, but it's an excellent place to begin. So no referral needed. I just saw the lovely Paula Hogg come into Studio 1 here at 3WBC, and she's getting geared up for a very lazy Sunday afternoon, and her tunes are guaranteed to make you feel very relaxed in the lead up to the next week. I'll be returning next month on Sunday the 16th of November with a great friend of the show, Paul Guerra, who'll be talking about his move from the head role at Victorian Chamber of Commerce, where he achieved so much for us Victorians, to the big job as CEO at Melbourne Football Club. Could be a flag coming up next year. Paul is an amazing, amazing human being. For me, next week, I'm travelling to Sydney for the Workplace Health and Safety Show, where I'm hosting a panel speaking about building practical safety systems without losing the human element. And then straight after that, I'm up with Mike Hagan, friend of this show, and he doubles up as producer also for the show. We're speaking together about men's health in the workplace and life-saving conversations we really should be having. Perhaps we should just play our show here. Now for your final song, Michael, here's a clue that you probably don't need. Rod. Is that
rod? Yeah, fish. Yep, fishing rod. Yep, got it.
by Angie McMahon?
Good one.
But before we go to this song, Michael, thank you so much for coming on the show today and for sharing not just your research, but everything behind it. It's been, as Zach would say, it's been an absolute joy listening to you and learning so much from you. It's you're a remarkable human being, and the world now knows a little bit more about you.
No, thanks, Rae. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate this opportunity, and again, thank you for your service and the work that you do as well. So thanks for having me.
Thank you. It's an absolute pleasure. So now I've got to get back to your here we go, back to your song list. And remember, everyone, just be kind, just be caring, and just don't be a beep, because it actually kills people. Good one. Hey?
Good message.
See ya.